in the early 70s. Your grandmother worked for a nurse who made arrangements for us to take over the payments on a 1972 Porsche, 5 forward gears. I was making collection calls for Sears, and so I was driving from here and there. I'm by myself, and I'm out on the west side of Fresno County, where it's flat. There's nothing for miles. I shut the radio off. I rolled the windows up. I went through 4 gears, and I was at 110 miles an hour. The only thought that I had was, what happens if a jackrabbit jumps out into the road? If I hit it and I lost control, I wouldn't be able to stop. I said, that's enough. That was exhilarating.
Welcome, and thank you for listening to the 8 Decades podcast. I'm your host, Josiah Freeland, and in this mini podcast series, I'm sitting with my grandpa, Steve Freeland, to explore the past 80 years of American history, looking at it from his perspective and sharing a few of his personal stories. In this third episode, we're going to be diving into the 70s decade, 1970 to 79. You're going to hear stories about starting a family, President Nixon's secret scandal, and the first landing on Mars. And those are just a few of the things you're going to be hearing about in this episode. We're going to kick things off with the year my grandpa was 29 years old. He started this decade with having kids.
1970 was an interesting year. I had sold my interest in the chicken restaurant at the end of 1969. So when 1970, literally on January 1st of 1970, I was not employed. I didn't have a job. I found a job as a credit trainee at Sears in January of 1970. And of course, Connie was a registered nurse by then, and she was working. So we weren't missing any meals. We could pay the house payment. But it was a struggle. And I had been at Sears just 3 months when Connie came home one night and said that she was working in the pediatrics department. She came home and said that they had delivered this baby boy, and he was going to be in the hospital for a week or so because he was jaundiced. His skin was yellow. He had red hair and blue eyes and fair complexion, and I lit into her and said I was not interested. I knew where she was going. She was wanting to adopt this baby because she knew that the baby was going to be up for adoption. The mother had signed papers that upon birth that the child would be released for adoption with the county. And that night, God just really, I'd said to Connie that I wanted for us to have our own children. I wasn't interested in adopting. And that night, God just really touched my heart and made me realize how selfish I was being. And so the next night when I picked her up at work, she worked until 11:30 at night. I said to her that I wanted to know more about this baby boy, and she just lit into me like she never had. And her very words were, "Do not torment me." And I had changed my mind. God had changed my attitude in 24 hours. So I convinced her that I was serious. Our Sunday school teacher at the church we were going to at the time was an attorney, and we contacted the attorney and said, here's the situation. We know how we know about this baby being available. We would like to explore the possibility of adopting this baby if he's still available.
It's humbling to hear how this played out, him opening his heart up to God to change his attitude about it. He continued to explain that his wife, Connie, was able to get the address and phone number of the baby's mother from the hospital records. Their attorney contacted the family and went forward with the process.
The mother she was only 15, lived in Clovis. The attorney called Connie back couple of days later and said he had made an appointment. If we were still interested, we could meet the grandparents and the mother at their home in Clovis on Sunday afternoon. It was after church. And so we did. And we met with the grandparents and the baby's mother. The hardest thing I ever had to do in my life was to talk to this girl and ask her very personal questions. Was there alcohol? Was there drugs? Nationalities? Backgrounds? In a sense, how'd you become pregnant? What about the father, the baby's father? To talk to a 15-year-old, and she had gotten pregnant when she was 14. So I mean, she was really a young girl. Anyway, we spent an hour and a half or so with the grandparents and the mother, and left because they had to make a decision as to whether to allow us to adopt or to continue with their process where they were going to allow the county to place the child. Tuesday morning, the attorney called and talked to Connie and said, "You still want to be parents?" And of course, she said yes. And he says, "Okay, pick up the baby at 3:00 across the street from where you work at the welfare department." She worked at the county hospital out by the fairgrounds. The welfare department at that time, the child welfare department, was literally across the street from there. I was working until 9:00 that night. I couldn't go at that late moment. I couldn't. So Connie had to be at work at 3:00. She got to work at before 3, made arrangements with another nurse to cover for her so that she could go across the street. Connie's parents, be your great grandparents, they were there with Connie. And the welfare worker was angry because they had already made arrangements. They weren't legally committed to giving the baby to this, whatever the couple was. They had to process everything now differently from their perspective. And so basically the welfare department forced the mother, the baby's mother, to take the child from the foster parents who had the baby. The baby was out of the hospital by this time, and forced the mother to give the baby. It was just out of spite. And Connie had to go back to work, so she hands the baby to her mother, to Grandma Mary and Pinky, and she went back to work. I was at work at Sears. I got off work at 9, and of course, Connie's parents took the baby to their home. Right. Connie was working till 11:30 at night. I got off work at 9, went to Grandma Mary's house, and your grandmother would not let me in the house. I was sick, and here was a baby was what, 7 days, 10 days old, I guess. So she wouldn't, and rightfully so, she didn't want me near the baby. So I had to go home, and that's how we got your Uncle Mark. 9 months later, your Uncle Rodney was born. Connie was pregnant with Rodney. She might have been pregnant with him at the time that we adopted Mark, because he was born, we think, 3 weeks early, 3 weeks premature. So here they are. We ended up with two boys, 9 months apart in age. That was the beginning. Well, that's the beginning of 1970, and that's the end of 1970, because Rodney was born in December. October of that year, we went to court with our attorney. The attorney presented everything to the court. The judge signed the adoption papers, and he was ours. Long story. That's how we came to have those two.
My grandpa had a story to tell about driving his first two kids to get ice cream.
We would, a couple of times a month, we would put your uncles in the back seat. There's really would only hold three people. Mark and Rodney were just little kids. They were 4 years old. We'd put them in the back seat, and we would drive to the west side. There used to be a ice cream outlet. They actually made their own ice cream. It was Mellow Ice Cream. It was over on Fresno Street, south of downtown Fresno, and we'd go over there, buy ice cream, and kids would sit in the back, and we'd get them an ice cream cone. But as the kids were, and would be your Uncle Mark, he'd be licking the ice cream cone. He could hear the gears changing as I shifted. And I wasn't going fast, but I was changing gears often. And he would be licking this melting ice cream cone. Faster, Daddy, faster. Couldn't say faster. Faster.
My mom was born in 1972. To my grandpa, this is his daughter-in-law.
I'll tell you something, though, that you probably are not aware of. I'm trying to think of the timing. I think it was about 1968, 69, somewhere in there. Connie worked for, it was probably 60, might have been 66 or 67. Connie worked for Dr. Ron Smith here in town. He sponsored a youth group at a Methodist church here in town, and a Christian man. And he took his youth group to Morro Bay for a weekend, and Connie went with him too. There were some girls in the group, and she went along just to help out. Guess whose home they stayed in? Your great-grandparents.
Really?
Yeah. Your grandmother, Norma, her parents' home.
That's kind of crazy, right? My grandma from my dad's side met my grandma from my mom's side. Yet this was before my parents were even born. They were from different cities, so they didn't know that their children had even started dating each other until years later.
After your parents started dating and getting serious, and Connie meeting Norma, they figured it out. They put two and two together, and so there was that connection before your mother was born.
Following those years, my dad was born in 1975. I asked if the situation was any different than the prior pregnancy.
Considerably different. Mark was immediate because it was an adoption, and it all happened in less than 2 weeks' time. Rodney your Uncle Rodney was an emergency because Connie woke up in the middle of the night, Christmas Eve? Yeah, it was Christmas night. She started bleeding during the night. And so I had to take her to the hospital. We knew that she was going to have a baby, but we didn't think wasn't planned for another 3 weeks or so. And because he was early, he was turned. And so they had to do an emergency C-section on Connie. But in your dad's case, in Nathan's case, we knew she was pregnant, of course. It was planned. The expected due date was Valentine's Day. And because Rodney was born cesarean section, at that time, the doctors were not wanting to do a natural birth because the muscles are weaker and they were concerned. So your mother said, fine, I want to have another cesarean. So she could plan that, but she refused to have the baby on Valentine's Day. She did not want that.
Why?
Just the idea. Here's a love day, a day of love, she didn't want that to distract from. One of the reasons was so that his birthday wouldn't be a distraction because of Valentine's Day, which is kind of what happens with Rodney, who's born on the 27th of December.
Yeah, it's so close.
It's so close to Christmas that it's a distraction. And we got in the habit with Rodney making sure that on Christmas he didn't get a birthday present. That birthday was saved until his birthday.
Yeah.
We wanted a recognition, a separation of the two dates, and that's what Connie wanted with your dad. So his birth was planned before Valentine's Day.
Right.
She also, and I don't know if you knew this, being a nurse, having gone through the C-section before, knowing that, I mean, everything up to this point said this is a healthy baby. You're healthy. You're not going to have any problems. Do you know what your grandmother decided to do? She talked the doctors into putting a mirror up and let her watch
No way.
the birth, do the incision, all of that.
Wow.
And she saw that. I mean, she's awake. I mean, they numbed her, and but she actually got to see, not just feel, but see your dad's birth.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I think so too. And I could have been in there too, but there's no way I wanted to do that. So your dad's birth was anything but different than your uncle's and his brother. Entirely, all three of them, their births were entirely different.
Taking a few steps back to 1971, the voting age was lowered from 21 to 18 years old.
I had forgotten that took place. The main emphasis or argument for doing that at that time was we were sending 18 and 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds to Vietnam and having them killed, and they couldn't even vote. So the lowering of the voting age from 21 to 18 made a lot of sense. And of course, I was well beyond that age.
Yeah, you would have been 30 years old.
So it didn't affect me, other than that I agreed with what the change did, that it allowed people that were eligible to be drafted and sent off into harm's way to vote, to express their opinion.
In 1972, the United States and the Soviet Union had signed an anti-ballistic missile treaty. But as it turns out, there was so much happening in his own life around that time that international treaties weren't exactly top of mind. I'll let him explain.
That period of time, I've got two babies.
That's right.
Both Connie and I are working. We bought a house. We sold a house. We bought the neighbor's house. Your great-grandfather had died in 1970. So your grandma Mary was living by herself. Your Aunt Laura had graduated and she had moved up to the Oakland area to teach. So Grandma Mary was by herself. She had a house. It was basically, she was willing to sell it. So she was going to sell her house and buy a duplex in the Tower District. At the same time, we bought the house that was next. Connie and I bought the house that was next to us. We took over payments. We gave somebody $500 and took over payments on their loan on the house. We were then going to. We attempted to trade our two houses, and your Grandma Mary was going to. Your great grandma Mary was going to invest some of her money from the sale of her house, and we were going to buy an apartment house that Connie and I would move into, and I would manage the apartment house. And there were 6 apartments, either 6 or 8 apartments in there on Dakota and Palm area. We moved into the apartment. There was a 3-bedroom. One of the apartments was vacant. It was for the owner. This was 3-bedroom. It was a nice apartment. We moved into it while this other transaction was taking place. And that's when Rodney was born premature while we were in the apartment. We backed out of the purchase of the apartments and the exchange of our properties, and because we didn't agree to we didn't want the kind of financing that it was going to cost, and we couldn't make ends meet with the apartments, and we moved into the duplex that in the Tower District that your grandmother had purchased. She hadn't sold her house yet, but she had sold another house that she had near Roosevelt High School. And we moved into this duplex in the Tower District, and we were there only 3 or 4 months, if I remember right. Connie found a house that she bought for us, and we moved out of that. Your grandma Mary sold her house, and she moved into the duplex that she had bought. Connie and I had moved 1, 2, 3 times in 4 months, and your grandmother had moved. We moved her, so that was once. But in the meantime, the houses that Grandma Mary wasn't living in but was selling, we tore down the garage. It was dilapidated. One of Connie's cousins was in town. Robert and I literally tore down the garage and took it to the dump. So these things that were happening nationally that you're talking about, there were so many other things going on in our lives at the time that it wasn't all that big a deal, or didn't have any real effect on us.
Yeah, there was clearly a lot going on for him that year. We're going to switch gears over to talk about all the crazy stuff that happened with President Nixon. Now, there were details that were left out as he explained the history, so I'm going to try and fill in the gaps for you.
When Nixon was elected president, his vice president was Spiro Agnew from Maryland, I think.
And you might have heard about the Watergate scandal. If you haven't, here's a basic summary. One of the nights of June 1972, 5 men broke into the Democratic National Committee headquarters. They were caught trying to wiretap phones and steal documents. The men were connected to Nixon's re-election campaign, and over the next 2 years or so, investigations proved that Nixon had tried to cover up his involvement in this break-in.
And of course, he was re-elected president during that time. Spiro Agnew resigned from the vice presidency because of bribes he had taken or tax evasion or something. I've forgotten the details. Anyway, he resigned in disgrace from the vice president. This had never happened where the vice presidency became vacant. Gerald Ford became the vice president as his replacement.
After all the information had come out that Nixon was connected to the break-in, an impeachment had been approved. Right before the House of Representatives could vote to finalize the impeachment, he resigned from his presidency.
And when Nixon resigned, Gerald Ford became the president. And to this day, Gerald Ford was the first and only president that was not elected to that position.
Wow.
He got it by happenstance. He was a good person. He was a good president, but he was never elected to that. There were probably some people that didn't like him for a variety of reasons, but Ford was highly thought of by everybody. There wasn't any concern about him being president. There were people that would disagree with him on political issues, but he was honest, well-liked, well-experienced. He'd been a senator from Michigan, I think, or congressman. No, I think he was a senator. But he had been around for 25 years, probably. People were not concerned about him destroying the country.
President Ford then pardoned Nixon in September of 1974.
And, of course, he's defeated by Carter
in the
next election, 1976, I think.
In 1974, a 55-mile-per-hour speed limit was imposed nationwide.
Gas became expensive. As a country, we were dependent on oil coming in from Middle East, and it was being cut off, or we were only able to get so much of it. It was becoming scarce. became more expensive. And the cars, primarily the cars that were being manufactured, especially in the United States, they were just gas guzzlers. Mm. And, 8, 9, 10, 12 miles a gallon.
Wow.
Is what most of them were getting. Environmental issues that went with smog and gas guzzlers that creating the smog and so on was beginning to take place. And the faster you drive a car, the harder you drive an engine, the more gas that it uses. So somebody came up with the idea of lower the speed limit to 55 on federal highways anyway, and you'll save money, you'll save gas, it's safer. So there were a variety of reasons for the implementation of that. But the primary was to conserve gas. Probably stayed in place until, I want to say, maybe the mid-'80s. For a long time, anyway. It was several years.
1976 is the year that the first VHS came out.
Josiah, I still don't know anything about the technologies. I couldn't tell you what a VHS is.
This answer led to a follow-up question of if technology was ever something he was into.
No, it was never anything that I was interested in. And even today, I kind of have an attitude about, why do you want to do it different than what you've been doing it? Whatever it may be.
Right.
Why do you want to teach kids in a different way than what I learned? I turned out all right. Why do you sell cars today without a spare tire? Why does it cost more money to put a spare tire on the car? That's something you used to pay for when you bought the car. Now you have to pay extra to get it. Why do you have to go with LED lights? What's wrong with the ones that were made 10 years ago that aren't LED? Those kinds of things. I don't obsess over it. Mm. Do I have a difficulty with changes? To some degree. Mm. Do I eventually come around to whatever the change is? In most cases, yes. So when you, especially when you talk VHS and whatever else there are, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me when I bought the car that I have today, that I couldn't buy it with a CD player. What's wrong with CDs? They work. It was something that, I've got a whole stack of CDs. I don't need to buy new ones, but I can't buy new ones because I can't use them. That stereo over here, your Uncle Mark looked all over the world practically for me to buy that because it's a CD changer. And I can use those stacks of CDs that I've got. Mm-hmm. But I can't get one for a car. Mm-hmm. I guess I could, but it would cost me $1,000 more. I know that it's not something that people today, the general people, want because there's other things available. Play it off your phone or whatever. Okay, I see it, but it doesn't mean I have to like it. Change, especially in the technical world, is a little difficult for me to. Mm-hmm. I can go along with it, but I'm not really interested in becoming part of it, especially today for me. Why should I immerse my knowledge myself into something that's probably not going to be around in 5 or 8, 10 years from now, especially when I may not be around 5 years from now. Mm-hmm. Not that I'm going to die tomorrow.
On Tuesday.
It'll be next Tuesday. Am I being short-sighted? Well, only time will tell. If I live 10 years from now, maybe something that's new today or better today is still going to be better 10 years from now. Mm-hmm. And 10 years from now, I don't think I'll care enough about it to wish I had gotten involved.
I can't really blame him for his perspective on this. I mean, think about it. Technology moves and adapts so quickly these days. There's so much change, and if you don't mind how the old way of things worked, why change it? Like the old saying goes, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Sticking in the general technology topic, in 1976, the Viking 1 lander was the first landing on planet Mars.
I'll take your word for it that happened then. I mean, I knew that at some point in time that we had done that, but and I marvel at the fact that somebody was able to do that. But it's so much beyond my thinking, other than marveling at it. I can't even begin to comprehend all that goes into making something like that possible. And in spite of what some people believe, I don't think it's all that important. It's certainly not going to affect my life in any way. It's not going to happen in my lifetime, even if I live to be 100. The Mars, a trip to Mars by 2035, they think they can get somebody to Mars, whatever the date is. I don't even know if you can find a sane person that would want to do that. I mean, they're going to be in a spaceship for 18 months before they get there.
Right. The following year, the Apple II computer started selling. Although he isn't super into technology advancements, I asked about this and how computers in general had affected his life. Because whether he liked it or not, the world moved and pushed towards computerizing everything, especially in his field of work.
Yeah, about 1977, I was the assistant manager of the credit department at Sears. And we consolidated the credit departments, I think from Merced to Visalia in the Fresno office. We had, I want to say probably 90 employees in the credit department. When we made the conversion to a credit central instead of an individual standalone department, we had, I want to say about 90 people. 2 years later, when I left, we had probably 50, maybe 60 people, because when we had done the consolidation of the various Sears, it was due to technology. Everything was becoming more and more computerized. And so we became a computer center, a credit computer center, and we didn't need as many people. Transactions were happening faster because of the computers and the credit central processing. That whole process left somewhat of a bad taste in my mouth. It's one of the reasons I got fired. When we did this the conversion, there was a big push on female managers. I was an assistant manager, and they brought in another assistant. Turned out to be 3 of us were assistant managers, me and a guy by the name of Jim Schmidt, and they brought in a lady. Jim and this lady learned the computerization pretty quickly, and I drug my feet a little bit on it. I did all right, but ultimately Jim quit, and this lady, I got fired, and this lady became the single assistant manager because they wanted women in management. And there wasn't any up to that point. So I recognized then, the importance of computers, technology, and the need for change in attitudes and so on. But I'm going to get there. We're going to talk about Apple.
Right.
I got fired in November of 79. In December of 79, early January, I went to work for a equipment leasing company. Guess what we financed? We financed some of the very first Apple computers. I mean, this is 2 years after, maybe 3 years after they started making them. But we financed a whole bunch of Apple computers, different companies, individuals. You know what one cost then?
I do not.
The cheapest of them was about $9,000. What cost $9,000 then, you could buy today for $2,000.
Yeah.
And we financed a lot of Xerox was doing them, and Apple, and I I think IBM got involved in smaller ones.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they were already doing these huge ones,
Yeah.
the room size, but they Apple just destroyed the small business market with them over the years. The computers that Apple came out with initially wouldn't do half as much as what your iPhone will do today. So I'm familiar with that time frame with Apple.
In the same year, 1977, the first Star Wars movie to open in cinemas, A New Hope, premiered.
I remember working at Sears and Sears coming out with, they were promoting something, and they used they had an R2D2 in different stores. I don't remember what they were promoting, but a lot of companies did that kind of thing because Star Wars had become so popular.
Right.
I think the first time I saw Star Wars, I took your father to see it, and he was probably 9. Connie had already taken the 2 older ones, your uncles, to see it. I don't remember if I couldn't go or if I didn't want to go. I was concerned about the message that it was giving little kids, that there's some violence in it and weird people and that kind of stuff. And Nathan was too young to see it when Connie took the other 2. So I'm guessing it was 84, 85, somewhere in there, when I took your dad to see it. I enjoyed it, and I've seen it several times since. I didn't lose any sleep over it coming out or not seeing it right away or anything like that.
1978, the People's Temple Jonestown mass suicide took place.
Jones was from the Bay Area, San Francisco, and he how many hundreds of people he got them into Guyana, down in South America, and they built what they call Jonestown, as a compound, a retreat, their own country, whatever you want to call it. And they were a cult, and Jones was the god, basically. And there was an investigation, and a congressman and some of his staff, flew down there to see Jones to investigate his cult, basically. And upon their leaving, the congressman and his party leaving, they murdered the congressman. And several of the people that were with him before they could get on the plane and leave. And Jones knew that when the word of the murders got out, it was over. And so he had literally made vats of poison, liquid poison, and he had gotten the people, and this went over, the development of Jonestown was over several years, actually. But his followers, he convinced them that it was time to move on, and he told them all to drink this potent, and I've forgotten now how many people died, but it was
I looked it up. It
hundreds.
909.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to say about 1,000 people, and just horrible. Just that somebody would have that much influence over that many of people.
Yeah.
But he was he thought himself as God, and they treated him that way, and whatever he did, When he said jump, they said how high?
In Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, the 3 Mile Island nuclear accident took place. This was in 1979.
I don't remember. I don't know even if I knew what the reasons were, but there was an error or a malfunction or something at the nuclear power plant, and it contaminated. It didn't explode, melt down. I don't know what the word is to describe it, but it was a disaster, and it was a scary thing. Up to that point, nuclear power was the thing to be doing. I mean, building nuclear power plants. There was one built in the late 50s, 10 miles away from where I grew up.
Really?
The best man in my wedding as a senior in high school. He was just pushing a broom, but he worked at a nuclear power plant that was being built outside of Lincoln, Nebraska. A roommate that I had was an Olympic wrestler, lived in San Francisco. He was an engineer. He helped design the nuclear power plant in not Morro Bay, but Paso Robles or wherever that is over on the coast in that area. Nuclear power plants were being built all over the country, all over the world. But when this accident happened, nobody wanted anything to do with nuclear power plants anymore. And so we don't build them here in the United States. The one over on the coast was built in the mid 80s, maybe a little later. I mean, after, but it's being shut down now because of people, because it's on the coast. It's near earthquake faults. But in France, they're still building them.
Oh, really?
Yeah. France has probably more active nuclear power plants than, I shouldn't say than anywhere in the world, but they have a lot of them. The one that blew up in Ukraine, 20 years ago or whatever, Chernobyl, is inactive now, but the other one, another one there in Ukraine that's in the news now that the Russians keep shelling near it.
November of 1979, 63 Americans were taken hostage in the American embassy in Iran.
Oh, yeah. It was huge. That, to a large degree, was the reason President Carter wasn't reelected. Ronald Reagan was elected instead because Jimmy Carter screwed things up. But the Iran hostage occurred. Iran was an American ally, and the Shah of Iran was supported financially and every other way by the United States. And the Shah was basically the ruler of Iran, and he was very dictatorial and not very well liked in Iran. There was a revolution in Iran, and he had cancer. The Shah had cancer, and we allowed him to come to the United States, I think New York, wherever it was, somewhere in the United States, for treatment. During that time, the Iranians took over the American embassy in Tehran and held 63 Americans hostage. These are American diplomats and personnel. These are government officials, high government officials. And they kept them as hostages for, was it a year?
444 days.
Okay, it was more than a year. And they were not released until
1981.
In the day after, I think it was the day after Ronald Reagan was sworn into office as the president. And depending on who you want to believe, they only released the American hostages after they knew that Jimmy Carter was not going to be reelected. Because Jimmy Carter, even though he had made an attempt to free them, wasn't going to hold Iran's feet to the fire. Ronald Reagan said, if I'm elected, I'll hold their feet to the fire. We'll send in B-52s, or he didn't say that, but I mean, he would hold them accountable immediately. And so the day after he was sworn in as the president, Iran releases the hostages. And Reagan, to his benefit, saw to it that Jimmy Carter was on the plane to meet the hostages as a gesture of graciousness, because they had been captured during his presidency. It explains why our relationship with Iran today is what it is. You know, they took American diplomats, kidnapped them, threatened them with life, and kept them for a year and a half or whatever before releasing them. And I don't think we still have any diplomatic relations with Iran. I think all of our diplomatic relations are through Switzerland, or another country represents our interests. So the Iranians had a lot of reasons, excuses for doing what they did, none of which could be justified, in my opinion. So when you try to beat up on your neighbor, if that neighbor's family supports your neighbor, you have to beat up on your neighbor's family, and it's a lot more complex than that. But and I think that this new guy on the street was a bigger bully than they wanted to deal with.
Thank you so much for listening to the third episode of this project. In the fourth episode, we'll be discussing the 80s decade. We're going to be sharing stories about my grandpa balancing 4 jobs at once, the invention of the first mobile phone, and a new Coca-Cola product called Coke 2. The history in this podcast series was fact-checked by Jeffrey Copeland, sound design by Bihoy Ahmed, video backgrounds by Nathaniel Agueros, and the episodes were directed and edited by me, Josiah Freeland. A special thank you to my grandpa, Steve Freeland, for letting me share his stories and perspectives. This production was made possible in part by the Community Media Access Collaborative.
Well, the real thing is in for a real change these days. Coca-Cola is altering its 99-year-old secret recipe. But if things have been going better with Coke all along, why tamper with success?